This is Carolina Ghost Towns, a podcast about the vanished towns and lost communities in South Carolina, North Carolina, and maybe a few other places. I'm your host, Tom Taylor.
Dr. W.E. Fitch, noted medical authority on mineral water, in a recent radio talk over the National Broadcasting System stated, "For many years, it has been a mystery, even to the medical world, just how natural mineral waters produced."
Do you suffer from neuritis? American and European scientists agree that mineral water is beneficial. Many of these people have to travel thousands of miles. Many of them were suffering untold pain from rheumatic aches, from arthritis, from neuritis, from gout. Others suffered from...
A wonderful gift of Mother Nature. A prominent physician thus writes of Wilaka mineral water. It is beneficial in all conditions of inflammation of urinary and genitourinary organs.
Mineral Springs Hotel, Helena, Montana. It has been analyzed and found to contain the very best of medicinal qualities for dyspepsia, indigestion, biliousness, gravel, piles, diseases of the kidneys and bladder, constipation, sour stomach, catarrh of the stomach and bowels, skin diseases, etc., etc.
Once upon a time, mineral spring resorts were all the rage in South Carolina. The waters were thought to have healing properties and could cure all ills. I've already done episodes in Season 1 about the Temple of Health and Stomp Springs. These were just small potatoes compared to some operations. In the late 1800s and early 1900s, elaborate hotels popped up around mineral springs such as Chick Springs near Greenville, Glen Springs in Spartanburg County, and Harris Lithia Springs in Lawrence County. These resorts featured all sorts of amusements, including fine dining, swimming, dancing, concerts, and even bowling. All this with the added benefit of being able to partake of the miraculous healing waters of the springs. And if that weren't enough, the spring water was often bottled and sold to patrons so that they could continue healing at home. Sometimes, the bottled spring water was sold in local grocery stores. The Great Depression spelled the end of most of these grand resorts. Even with the hotels closed, some ventures still sold their bottled water into the mid-20th century. Today's ghost town was at the heart of one of these bottling companies, though that's not how it started. The town of Shelton in Fairfield County, South Carolina, never had a resort hotel, but it was the home of the Shivar Springs Bottling Company. Just a note here. You heard me say Shivar, but later in the episode, there's an interview where it's pronounced Shivar. I don't really know the correct pronunciation. Right now I'm too lazy to re-record everything, so I'm leaving in my original pronunciation. Maybe someone who knows could leave a comment as to the correct pronunciation of Shivar or Shivar Springs Bottling Company. David Shelton was born in Virginia in 1750 and served as a captain in the Revolutionary War. At the age of 40, he moved his family from Virginia and settled in the area in 1790. In the South Carolina archives, I found a petition for a ferry across the Broad River, signed by Thomas Shelton and others. But the petition is undated. I'm pretty sure that Thomas was the son of David Shelton, the original settler. Shelton's Ferry and Shelton's Store show up on Robert Mill's 1825 map of Fairfield County. As a river crossing with a store, the location became a natural gathering spot. Boats regularly traveled between Shelton, Columbia, and to communities upstream, carrying loads of cotton and other goods. This ad from the Daily Phoenix in 1865 is typical for river travel on the Broad River.
Having 2 good boats, I will commence a tri-weekly line to and from Columbia to Alston and Shelton's Ferry every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Passengers will be carried to either point at reasonable rates payable in specie or provisions. For freight or passage, apply on board at Geiger's Mill. L.J. Hancock.
Things were changing in Shelton, though, and shipping was about to give way to another mode of transportation. In 1859, the Spartanburg and Union Railroad was completed from Columbia to Union. From Columbia, it went through the community of Alston, through Shelton, then crossed the Broad River into Union County. River traffic and railroad lived side by side for a while, quite literally in this case. The railroad tended to parallel the river. Another 1865 article in the Daily Phoenix was more explicit in this connection.
A line of boats will ply regularly between this city and Alston and Shelton's Ferry, connecting with the Greenville and Columbia, in Spartanburg, and Union Railroad at the above points. For freight or passage, apply to W.M. Simons, Bull Street above Blanding.
An article by Ron Chicone, Jr. says that the coming of the railroad was the true beginning of the town of Shelton. Quote, "One thing to understand about Shelton is that its foundation was built, both literally and figuratively, on the railroad, specifically the Spartanburg and Union Railroad. This 5-foot gauge railroad was completed in 1859. It started at what is today another ghost town on the east bank of the Broad River, Alston, where an existing railroad connected Columbia to Greenville. From Alston, this new line ran north and crossed the river near Shelton's Ferry, then made a beeline to Carlisle, Union, and Spartanburg. An April 1856 newspaper article in the Carolina Spartan reads, quote, "There is now a depot erected at Shelton, and every requisite accommodation for receiving and discharging freight," close quote. And also closing Ron Chicone's quote. Of course, this was just as the Civil War was getting underway. Sherman's troops came through wreaking destruction. The trestle across the Broad River at Alston was destroyed. The railroad at Shelton and its trestles were spared, but the area was still hit hard by Union troops. According to one witness, quote, "Several large residences, a score of cotton gins, and one of the best flour mills in the upcountry were burned. Hundreds of horses were carried off. Nearly all the provisions were destroyed," close quote. Another said, quote, "I arrived at my home on the 4th July, 1865. I find here the stable, cribs, gin house, and 62 bales of cotton all burned up, and a gin house on a lower place burned," close quote. Cyclones, or tornadoes, accomplished what the Union troops could not. Twice in the late 19th century, the trestle at Shelton was washed out, but each time it was rebuilt. Business also expanded in the post-war era. In 1875, Bradstreet and Company reported 4 general merchandise stores in Shelton. I found multiple advertisements for W. W. Crosby's store in the Unionville Times. One 1876 ad described the types of goods carried by Mr. Crosby, including, quote, ladies' dress goods, linens, long cloths, hose trimmings, long gloves, millinery goods, etc. In groceries, you can get anything you want: bacon, ham, flour, lard, sugar, coffee, tea, and spices, molasses, and salt. My hardware stock is complete in all things needed on the farm, in the house, or the shop. Close quote. Crosby also advertised boots and shoes, crockery and glassware, and ready-made clothing. A later Crosby dealt in cotton goods. I don't know if J.B. Crosby was a relative of W.W., but in 1882, a writer to the Fairfield News and Herald described J.B. Crosby's additions to the town.
There has been put up at Shelton a telegraph office, and Mr. J.B. Crosby, who lives about 1.25 miles from his store, expects to put up a telephone line soon from his dwelling to his store. The railroad company is putting up a new bridge at this point across Broad River. I also learned that they expect to build a new depot here, which is badly needed. J.B. Crosby and Company expect soon to build a large and handsome store on the west side of the river. There is plenty of room for businessmen with money.
But what about those healing springs mentioned at the beginning of this episode? Chicone writes that, quote, of equal importance to the cotton economy in any narrative of Shelton would be its famous mineral springs. These springs have always been revered locally for the excellent taste of the water and the healing properties that the water was said to possess. Close quote. There are lots of springs in the area thought to have healing properties. In the early 1900s, a traveling salesman named Nathaniel Frank Shivar took ill on a trip to Shelton. While convalescing, he discovered the healing springs on the property of Ida Newbill. Shivar became enamored of both the spring water and the widow Newbill. He married one and bottled the other. There were actually 4 springs on the Newbill property, just south of Shelton. Shivar concentrated on the commercial aspects of the water, rather than developing a resort hotel like those around many of the other upstate springs. He built several brick cisterns to hold the water and a bottling plant at Clayton Depot. The water was shipped all over the state, and ads ran in local papers for both the pure spring water and for ginger ale made from it. A typical newspaper ad for the ginger ale read as follows.
Sparkling, delicious Shivar ginger ale is far more than just a thirst quencher. It's a real health drink prepared with the celebrated alkaline water from the famous Shivar Springs and fortified with vitamin B1. Shivar helps improve lagging appetites, aids digestion, neutralizes excess acidity. Yes, when you toast your friends with Shivar ginger ale, you can say, "Here's to your health," and really mean it.
One advertising flyer stated that Shivar spring water was, quote, for the treatment of dyspepsia, indigestion, gastritis, liver and kidney troubles, inflammation of the bladder, old sores, uric acid rheumatism, and gallstones, close quote. The flyer also encouraged patrons to, quote, drink 10 gallons. If no results, money refunded, close quote. Shivar was brilliant at marketing. He had a chemical analysis done on the water, then sent the analysis along with samples of the spring water to the South Carolina legislature. The House of Representatives was so impressed that they passed a resolution.
Resolved by the House of Representatives, that is, thanks be, and the same are hereby tendered, the Shivar Spring of Shelton, Fairfield County, South Carolina, for the excellent quality of water furnished its members during the season of 1909. This water is hereby commended to all who are in need of a pure mineral of medicinal properties.
As successful as Shivar Springs was, it couldn't prevent the inevitable. Nathaniel came down with a bad case of the flu in 1920 and never recovered. He died in Columbia in 1922 at the age of 58. W.B. McDowell was the last owner of the company and kept it in operation through the 1940s. In 2011, historian Andrea Lamadieu from USC interviewed then 85-year-old Tom McConnell about the time that he worked at Shivar Springs. McConnell was the last employee of the Shivar Springs Bottling Company. McConnell's nephew, Freddie McConnell, participated in the interview. I've edited McConnell's comments for time and to make the conversation flow a bit better. If you'd like to hear the entire interview, I'll post a link in the show notes. The entire interview is over an hour and a half long.
I born in 1926, the 7th day of May. I grew up here and I ain't able to see. We lived a long time back in this part of the section. Didn't even have power. No power or nothing with it. We lived back there. Well, everybody lived happy, you know. And so we lived back there, didn't have no lights or nothing. Yeah, I plowed that mule many days, picked cotton, and everything many days back in here. Yeah. Then I started to work at the plant when I was 14 years old. You had to be 16 years old to get a Social Security card. And they paid me on the desk until I got 16. And when I got 16 years old, I went straight out to working for the plant. And I worked there 14 years.
McConnell spent some time working at the Savannah River plant before returning to Shelton.
I come up and down and went back to the plant.
What do you mean when you say plant? Oh, Shivar Springs?
Shivar Springs.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did y'all pump the mineral water into those cisterns?
We had, that's where they pump it. They pump it and set it in there till they got ready to, got an order for the 5-gallon jugs.
Okay.
That's what they ship. They used to ship that on the train.
That's the mineral water.
Mineral water, yeah, they used to ship that on the train. It went to Florida, every which way. And I so mostly used that for hospitals.
Do you remember how much you bottled every day?
Talking about the water or the drinks?
The drinks?
Drinks? Oh no, I wouldn't have a high because they had 4 Dixies there running, and they have an order, kept drinks on hand all the time.
According to a 1959 article in the state newspaper, the bottling plant had a capacity of 700,000 bottles per year.
They made about the best ginger ale everybody said around here.
I have a question about the ginger ale. Did you ever drink it or taste it?
Oh, yeah.
I'm trying to get an idea of what made it so good. People remember it.
That ginger ale had that ginger in it and everything. And so they make it up. I help mix some of the syrup. Right.
So you mix the syrup for the ginger ale?
Not for the ginger ale, but for the orange, root beer, and all the other drinks. Right. But I think the ginger ale, it come in a 5-gallon bucket. No, in a keg, already mixed. All you got to do is put it in the thing. That it was good too. You've been out drinking too fast, it kind of cut your throat.
Were they bottling every day of the week?
Yeah, they bottle it every day, sometimes 6 days.
How many different drinks were there? You said ginger ale, and you said RC.
Oh,
What else?
We run a lot of drinks. We run ginger ale, orange, grape, sundrop, lime cola, root beer, and all that. They run that there. Even now they started on a little grape edit towards the last. Started running grape edits.
By the time Shivar Springs closed its bottling plant, the town of Shelton was already almost gone. The train no longer stopped for passengers, and residents were taking new highways into Winnsboro and Union for cheaper goods. The old depot, Wright store, and Shelton Company store were still standing in the 1960s, but all are now long gone. I recently paid a visit to the site of Old Shelton with fellow explorer Alan Russell. The road no longer goes down to the ferry landing, but ends at the railroad, which is still active. Using archival photographs as a point of reference, I found the locations of the general stores, the depot, and the old bank.
So as far as the town is concerned, right there, kind of where that clump was, that was the old Wright General Store. And right here was the Shelton General Store. And it had like boarding rooms, and it was more of a meeting place than an actual store. And then straight ahead where that those railroad ties are, that was the depot. Right here, this area.
Well, it makes sense. That's where the road would go. It goes to the stores and the depot.
Yeah. Well, the road did continue on around to the ferry, which was down that way.
So it just went on across?
Yeah. And where we were at that landing, that was the other end of the ferry.
Along the road, we found brick foundations for the Shelton Company and for residences that once lined the streets.
So that's the foundation of the old Shelton store. Concrete block.
Not a gigantic store. Well, it looks like it was as big as they could get it, as close to the train tracks as they could get it.
Yeah.
So which came first, the store or the tracks?
In this case, the store came later. But there were previous stores here because the ferry predates the railroad.
Mm-hmm. Is that generally true?
Yeah, usually.
Ferries before railroads.
Yeah, the Shelton store was built in 1914. And I'm not sure what that building was.
It turns out that the unknown building was the old bank. Only the foundations remained. These were located just up the hill on the main road. Along the road, we found brick foundations for the Shelton Company and for residences that once lined the streets.
It looks like there was a structure here. You see how it's kind of hollowed back?
Yep. And these are bricks.
Yeah.
And there are bricks in here.
Definitely a brick foundation.
And brick over there. So there's something least there. It wouldn't surprise me if that was like, where the general store owner lived, if he didn't live above the store.
And it was probably connected. I need to look back at the photographs, see if we can match those up.
I'll include the archival photos that we used and the photos that I took on that trip in the show notes. As for Shivar Springs, the cisterns once used to hold the spring water are still standing. These are now on the National Register of Historic Places. Some years ago, I found an entire case of Shivar bottles at the Pickens Flea Market. These were in a wooden case bearing the name of the company. I bought them right on the spot. They were used as vases in my niece's wedding. After the wedding was over, I really had no use for the bottles, so I donated them to the Fairfield County Museum in Winsboro. Andrea Lamadieu used photos I took of the bottles in her story about Shivar Springs, which includes the interview with Tom McConnell. Not far from the cisterns, we came across 3 cemeteries. In the woods behind Silver Hill Masonic Lodge, you can find the Shelton Family Cemetery. There, you'll find the graves of David Shelton, Thomas Shelton, and other members of the family.
Which of these headstones is the oldest? So this must be the Shelton family for whom the town is named.
The second farthest one out there has 1840 on it.
Okay. $1927, okay.
I don't know about what decade that is. Because of the style.
Yeah.
Even though it's all silver.
1896. This Shelton would have...
1916.
Okay.
William Jacob.
Across the street from the lodge is a ball field, and next to that, another cemetery that is rather forlorn and unkempt. There we found the grave of Thomas Jason McConnell, the Shivar Springs employee from the earlier interview. He died in 2013 at the age of 87. A couple of final comments. There's a landing, or at least river access, set up on the west side of the Broad River at the site of Shelton's old ferry. We checked it out on our recent trip to Shelton, and it looks like a place where we could launch a kayak. Sometime in the future, I want to do that and explore the area. I'll be sure to post a story on Random Connections when I do. Also, the Broad River Valley through Richland, Newberry, Union, Chester, and Fairfield counties was dotted with small towns along the railroads and the river that never quite made it. These were towns like Alston, Glimpville, Peak, Strother, Blair, Clayton, and Herbert. Any one of these might make an interesting episode all on its own, and I might look into that sometime. That does it for this episode of Carolina Ghost Towns. As always, I ask that you rate the show, leave comments and reviews, and share the show with your friends. Thanks again for listening.
In this southern ghost town, we found a story untold. In the shadows of the past, We unravel, secrets unfold. With each step we take, we journey back in time. In this southern ghost town, we leave our footprints behind.
Thanks for listening. The opening music was composed by Lex FM with additional music from Pixabay. The song Southern Ghost Town was generated by Suno AI. All other music was composed and recorded by me, Tom Taylor. Carolina Ghost Towns is a part of the Random Connections empire. It's pretty much a one-man show, so I wear all the hats, including producer, writer, researcher, sound engineer, publicist, and bartender. If you like the show, please subscribe on your favorite pod venue and be sure to give us feedback. If you have questions, comments, or ideas for the show, you can reach me at carolinaghosttownspod@gmail.com. For more information and show notes, visit randomconnections.com. Thank you.
In this southern ghost town, we found a story untold. In the shadows of the past, we unravel, secrets unfold. With each step we take, we journey back in time. In this southern ghost town, we leave our footprints behind.
Random Connections. Random Connections. Random Connections.